Welcome to the Business and Marketing Podcast That Makes Sense, the podcast dedicated to helping owners and founders gain clarity, untangle complexity, and eliminate the guesswork in running their business.
In each episode, we'll dive into business messaging and methods, clearing the unclear and turning confusion into specific, actionable solutions. We'll tackle and make sense of the challenges we all face, offering insights and strategies from right alongside you.
Our goal is to empower you to be the sense maker, giving you the tools to accelerate your business with clarity and confidence. So we've been thinking about this idea of clearing the unclears in our business and learning to become sense makers ourselves, kind of going on this journey together and really you and I, Dario, digging into what it is that we tend to do on a day-by-day basis. I think often when we do something instinctively, it can be quite refreshing to sit and unpack it like this, like we're doing here. And so far we've realized that we have to be able to name our problem. We have to have a mindset that looks for opportunities to learn. I have to be open to learning new things. And what we're going to be thinking about today is this idea of questions, and really the opener that I've got here, and I'll hand it over to you then to see your thoughts on this, is what if the way through our unclear or our problem isn't to have the answer, but to learn to ask a better question?
It's fascinating stuff, and just looking at the layout of our thinking over the last few weeks and months, we built this process on questions. We've thought a lot about unclears, and that would have raised questions in people's mind. What is an unclear? Where is an unclear? How does an unclear work? And so on. And so we've stirred questions in our thinking, and that's a good thing to do. But then our first question was, might it be that I can identify the obstacles that are keeping me from what I want? And the premise there was, to achieve my goal, I must begin to name my articles. So that was the question. Our second question was, might it be that I am my own unclear? And one of the things we've learned is that we've got to be able to ask and answer uncomfortable questions about ourselves, because very often we're at the heart of the problem. The third question in our series was, do I have the ability to internalize and apply the new things I learn? And again, to achieve my goal, I must develop my capacity to apply what I learn, the infrastructure, the Meccano set of life that I use to run my machine, my business machine. I've got to develop that to take on what I learn. And then the fourth question was, am I asking enough new useful questions to get more unique possible answers? And the premise here, and this is really important, is that to achieve my goal, I must constantly strive to ask more, better questions more frequently than I do now.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it occurred to me whilst we've been on this journey and thinking about it, that sense making is questioning and questioning is sense making. You can't separate the two, that they are one thing. They come with each other.
Yeah, true. Have you ever thought about the definition of question?
Kind of. I would say I haven't thought about it. I discussed it with a great chap called Sal Jeffries. We do some good thinking times together, and
Yeah.
he posed the question to me, or asked me what it means. And when we broke it down, came to this kind of conclusion that it's based off of the word quest. So to go on a journey, to discover, to look, to learn, to find, and to interrogate on this journey of a quest.
Yeah. Well, my thinking isn't rooted in something as romantic as sitting with a philosopher and thinking about the deep things of life, Brad.
He is quite the philosopher, yeah.
I went to dictionary.com, which feels quite cheap now, and a bit Raggedy Ann, but nonetheless I use them a lot. They suggest that amongst a whole host of various meanings that can be attached to the word question, that questions are the interrogation by which information is secured. And I think about that word interrogation. It's like going digging. You know, our new puppy, Rosie, has discovered that there's a gate that she can attempt to get under. And she's digging. She's definitely interrogating the structures that I've put in place to contain her in our back garden. And with this interrogation comes a sense of real urgency, of energy, of depth, of meaning, of intent, when I'm asking my questions, and just upping it a gear, the interrogation by which information is secured. In user-friendly English, that would probably be that questions are the tools that I use to open up new ground.
Oh, I like that one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I can introduce you to the fellow who gave it to me, actually.
He must be a real genius, that guy.
Yeah, he's one of the founders of SenseMaker.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, cool. I bet he's a nice guy. So
Yeah.
I think it's one thing to say, okay, you need to learn to ask considered questions, right? To open up
Yes.
this new ground, to take you to new spaces. But it's a completely different thing doing it and getting it. And you and I have both struggled over the years in different ways, in different areas,
Yeah.
when people who are offering to help guide through the books they've written or through webinars or podcasts, whatever it is, they say, oh, yeah, that's why you're stuck. Here's what you need to do. You need to do this thing. But they don't say how, right? So it's one thing
Yeah.
to say you need to learn to ask considered questions, but how on earth, where do we even begin?
Well, that is one of the root motivations for me to start SenseMaker in the beginning. The whole idea of helping people to find out the how. I can remember sitting through lectures and classes and tutorials and whatever speeches and so on with exactly that you just described, where people were saying this is how you should be and what you should do and so on. And I can remember turning to Sue once, my wife, and saying to her, expressing to her how frustrated I was that there's so many should do's and should become and should be that are left at that and are not explained. They don't say how you do it, and that's what inspired me to get going with SenseMaker. In the early days was just that sense of getting alongside people, as I've said before in the podcast, not as a teacher up front saying, as a guru, this is what you should be doing,
Yeah.
go ye therefore and do it, or as a coach standing on the sideline yelling instructions to the players on the game, but to actually get on the field and play the game with the people with whom I'm thinking,
Mm.
so that I'm an ally alongside and working it out with them,
Yeah.
uh, so that we both own the knowledge and we both grow and we actually do something about making it happen.
Yeah, I was having a conversation. There was a couple of conversations I had this week actually with two wonderful people, and they were both stuck in similar ways, but in different places in the marketing in their business. And I just spent 30 minutes with them on a Zoom call, and they felt so stuck at the start. And that's honestly that's the kind of call I love, where I just get to have a conversation with these people and just start with a simple question, what does the problem feel like, and just start
Yeah,
picking away at that thread, looking for the thread in the unclear and starting to help them pull at it, with being the objective person that can help them pull at that. and
yeah,
and they'll answer the question that I use to probe their situation. And when I'm thinking about asking these questions and getting behind whatever that block is, it's this kind of sense, and I'm not even sure how to articulate it, but where I'm listening to their answer and I'm thinking, okay, that's the answer that they've given. It's very likely that it's not yet the true reason or the true cause or the true answer, right? Our mind is going to offer up all of these suggestions first.
yeah,
And so I'm sitting there saying, okay, this is what they've given me. How can I ask a question that's going to take us behind that now? It's going to take us behind this next bit. And people in those calls get this like incredible sense. Like some people get quite emotional when it unpacks, some people get so excited and they just smile. And I love it. And so I was thinking about this, right? What is it? How do I know when I've got to that place for myself, when I'm thinking this through for myself? And I realized that when I know that I've got to new ground, when I can't immediately answer the question.
yeah,
If I get asked a question and I can deliver a response straight away, I don't usually rate that space and I keep going until I get to a question
yeah,
that I can't immediately answer.
yeah. Well, that's interesting that you say that, because in a way I see it similarly. I look for, like you say, new ground. I look for new action that I can take. It's going to get me to think about doing things that I've not thought about in the general course leading up to the discovery of that point. But in recent times, you and I have been working together on a new project, right? And I'm not being harsh when I say this, but to be honest, I do find Brad's style really frustrating when we're doing this kind of thinking. Not because he's a bad person, but because he's different and he doesn't think like I do. And I think this is where we lose a lot of opportunity to learn and to grow and to get better questions going. So, like I said, it's not an interpersonal conflict. It's just that we're wired differently. So he thinks in hieroglyphics and I think in words. That's basically it. And to get that interpretation to happen, that communication to happen, is very challenging because he offends my idea of what is right. And if you just listen to the story, you'll get to see where I'm going. His style offends my idea of getting to what could be my view of a correct response. This was, in fact, an unclear, and myself was at the heart of it.
Mm.
And I think that's a key principle in this exercise and in this process, is that when we can't get something going and we can't get the result that we're looking for, we tend to look at the people around us and pass blame and start saying, well, it's because Brad's not doing it in the way that I can connect that this is happening, or it's because customers aren't coming into my store, or because the weather's bad, or because, and we start to pass blame, which is a release valve for hard questions. And so in this process that I'm describing, I asked myself, am I the unclear? And I had to answer truthfully that yes, I was. And so I needed then to begin to question myself to gain clarity on this unclear that was me. And so I asked myself this: am I judging his approach from the point of view that I'm right?
Good point, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. It hurts to share this. Maybe I'm going down the wrong track here completely. But the true answer was yes. Yes, my way was right. His way was obviously wrong. And so my answer to my question was yes. Don't forget, I'm unpacking and unclear now so that I can break out and get moving again.
Yeah.
My second question was, am I getting the result I want by holding this position? And I wanted the result, and we were definitely not getting to the result. In fact, we were moving further away from it. And so I had to honestly say to myself, no. So then I asked, what alternative would I prefer? And part of me was saying that he'd just flipping do what I want and get this over with so we can crack on, you know. But in truth, what I really wanted was that we could find a way of bringing our two styles together without neutralizing each other. This would take our potential for idea growth out of the realms of multiplication and into the universe that is exponential growth, from linear to explosive growth. My next question was this: if I could change one thing in my thinking right now, what would it be? And my answer to that, after some consideration, was rather than control the output, how can I shift my position to allow him to be uniquely him and me to be uniquely me? Yeah. And you can see, I don't know if you can just get the feel for the journey that I went on. So then the question became, how do I create a situation that allows the power of both our thinking styles to blend? Yeah. So that we get a result that far exceeds what we can do on our own. And it carried on from there, and we put a solution in place, and actually we're both much better off for the development in my thinking because I grew up a bit more. And I think what you're saying when you share your story about people finding a sense of freedom in that is it does bring freedom in it, because it kind of breaks the walls that hold me close, and it opens up opportunities for new things to happen, as does the result of this story that I've just shared. Yeah. It's opened up new opportunities and new exciting ways. And the same with the folk that you were talking about earlier. Does that make sense, do you think?
It does. And it was quite funny when that situation was happening, because we were both getting irritated at each other, but at the same time we were both sense making, right? And so I was sense making your approach and you were sense making my approach, and we kept fixing each other's stuff. Every time one of us felt like we came to a solution, the other one would go and fix it, but then to me that was breaking it, and vice versa. And it was so frustrating until we realized that. And I think that sometimes it takes us getting to a point, right? What's going to push me to ask better questions? It takes us getting to a point where the frustration of where we're at becomes too much to sit by and continue with the status quo, with the
I agree,
the direction that we're going in.
Yeah. I agree entirely. And I think that's where we've got to be on our toes, because it's at that moment in time when I make the transition from frustration into questioning. Frustration, when I start moving myself out of the block or the unclear that I'm in, that I'm careful about what I do and what I allow to influence my thinking, and the people I allow to influence my thinking, because it's such a delicate and important stage. And I need to guard my mind and I need to guard my thoughts
Mm.
and make sure that I'm not allowing myself to be enticed
Yeah.
by shiny pennies,
Yeah.
and quick fixes. If it's a quick fix, it's probably not. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. All those old sayings that I can remember my dad telling me. But it's, yeah, that's that idea of getting moving
Mm.
and then looking out and making sure that I keep going in a productive direction, I think is also key.
Although I would say that sometimes it can be a quick fix. For example, and I'd be interested to hear what you think here. For example, this situation that we're talking about here, where we were both kind of not butting heads, but frustrated at each other. The fix was simple, and what I would say, and what I've kind of taken away from that situation is maybe my first port of call should be, am I overcomplicating this? Am I projecting an unclear into my situation because
Yeah,
my expectation or my the way I'm anticipating a situation,
presumption.
yeah, my presumption says this thing that we're trying to solve has to be complicated, right? And so I start off in the wrong direction, like with my compass upside down, backwards, inside out, and colored in black, so I can't actually see any directions on it because I've assumed that I'm solving something complicated when actually it was dead simple.
Well, I think I would agree and disagree at the same time. I would disagree because I would suggest that this struggle that we've had has been going for probably about 20 years, in the sense that we've had a different way of approaching things and we've never really understood that. And it's only in recent years that we've become aware of the mechanics of how we work. And as we absorbed new knowledge and began to implement that new knowledge in the mechanics of our relationship, that we begin to see a different result. And it was by going through the iteration spiral, the identify, clarify, learn, apply spiral, that we developed that thinking carefully between the two of us and arrived many years later at a breakthrough that has been so meaningful. And I think the reason it's so meaningful is because it's been something that we've desired to get right for such a long time. And so I think, yes, it can be a quick fix, a quick result. But oftentimes, I think if it looks like a quick result, if we really have a look at the story behind it, it's been a long journey of development and iterative trying and sticking it out. When there was opportunity to walk away, we stayed. When there was an opportunity to argue, we chose to just shut up and not carry on and just sulk, or whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
I think there's got to be that commitment to going through the journey of getting to the questions and then finally getting to the answers.
And I think following on from that, I think so often when we see that we're stuck and we see where we want to get to, our reason for starting out on this business journey in the first place, it can be really frustrating. And instinctively, I don't know about you, but instinctively, I think we can be, like you say, with this idea of quick fixes, lured into by default looking for an answer, right? We go around and we're looking for answers when in actual fact we should be looking for questions.
Yes.
Questions are our stepping stones.
Yes, exactly. And if you think about the idea of the spiral, as the spiral grows and you go round and round and round, and in the reality quadrant on the bottom left-hand side of the spiral, your spiral kind of crosses the growth continuum that's moving down in the reality quadrant. Wow, that's a complex thing. I might need to draw it somewhere. But basically, as you're moving around the learning spiral, you're building platforms of understanding.
Mm,
Um, and you're moving down the change continuum. So every time you come around, so you and I are different people now compared
yeah,
to what we were before we had this breakthrough.
100%.
100% different. And that realization played itself out in interactions with my clients, in interactions with Sue, my wife, with Lauren, my daughter, It's playing itself out all over the place. I've suddenly become aware that it's real and it's happening. And so, yeah, we got to be on our toes and we got to go where it goes, but we got to sure be ready for the action when it comes.
And I think for me, this idea of platforms of understanding that you touched on, for anyone that's not worked with us or heard us speak about this before, platforms of understanding, basically what we're talking about there is that very often our assumption is that from here, where we are in our current reality to where we want to get to is a
Yeah.
flat straight line, when in actual fact, it goes up incrementally, right? Because it's not easy. There's obstacles that we overcome. There's personal challenges. There's external challenges that we have to face. There's all these different things. When we overcome things like that, we're not left the same person. Like you just said there, we're different people now,
Yes.
having solved that challenge that you rightly pointed out has been about a 20-year challenge. We're different people. Our perspective has literally shifted, and we're
Yes.
looking at our environment from a different place now, a different
Yes.
place.
Entirely.
And so when we're talking about platforms of understanding, that's what we mean. We mean actually having a shift in perspective. And once we get to that new space, that new perspective shift, is when we can start to explore what's around us with a question. A question.
Very good. Very good. I see what you did there. I see what you did there. It's this platform of understanding ideas, an important one, and one we can't bypass in the sense that you've got to do the journey, and there's a price to growing your knowledge. In the same way as people need to pay for a house or they need to pay for a car, you've got to pay for knowledge, and it's often sweat capital that you use as is the currency, and chutzpah, and
Good word.
yeah, and just determination and a refusal to give up. And so you drew an interesting hieroglyph the other day when we were talking about this, and you had the two, like the chasm, didn't you?
Yes.
With a little guy. Do you want to just explain that again?
I think for the record, we should say that you didn't like my hieroglyphic,
No, I didn't.
but I'll explain it. It's a very good drawing. It was basically just a little stick man standing on a cliff edge with a big chasm and then another cliff edge on the other side.
Yeah. And as his knowledge was growing, little like paving stones
Yes,
emerged between the two
yes,
cliff tops, and he could walk across the paving stones.
that's it.
My preferred expression of that concept, which is why I prefer my expression to Brad's, I'll just have you know, is of a staircase. So when I'm explaining this journey, this change continuum, I talk about it in terms of the learning spiral, which if you look at the learning spiral from another angle, you can see a J curve.
Mm.
And the J curve comes down. So if you drew two axes and then you have about halfway up the middle axis, the upright, you put your line and that's your starting point, and then you go up 45 degrees angle and you put another dot and a line, and that's where you want to finish. And that's what Brad is saying. People think the journey between where I am now and where I want to be up the quadrant is a straight line, but it's not. What we've learned, and millions of people have learned before us and are far more adept at explaining it than I am, I'm sure, is that actually your journey is initially downwards
Mm.
into what we call the cup of suffering.
Yeah, I was waiting for that one.
Yeah, the place where you learn what you find out what you didn't know that you
That's
didn't
it.
know,
Yeah.
and that's where so many people stop, Brad. And I know in my own life that's where you kind of get tempted to give up, because it's so lost and it feels so
Foreign.
foreign, and you feel so vulnerable, and the where you want to go seems so far away as to be
Yeah.
almost impossible.
Yeah.
But this learning that you're talking about and this journey around the spiral that you're talking about, in my depiction of it, draws a little staircase up the J curve,
Mm.
and I climb my way out of the cup of suffering.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think we're both saying the same thing from different angles, which
100%.
is what we do. But you've got to create room for movement, and you've got to be willing to pay the price. And that often, like I said, is sweat equity.
And I think, if you're in the cup of suffering right now and you're listening to this and things aren't going to plan and it's not as you expected it to be encouraged, because firstly, we all go there. And secondly, it can feel really disheartening when you're there and you feel so low down, and you look up at the destination that you thought you were heading towards, and it seems so far away, as Dario says. But what I want to encourage you with is that the peculiar thing about learning to make sense and ask considered questions is that when you open up that space of new ground, it doesn't have to be the destination, but you can open up this next platform of understanding and move into that new ground. And the strange thing that you'll find is that you'll be sitting there and you'll be saying to yourself, I don't know what took me so long to get to this point.
Yeah,
This is so
it's true.
obvious. Why didn't I see it before? And that's because you've shifted your perspective. And so you don't have to get to your destination for your progress to feel like home, to feel rewarding, to feel comfortable. And once you're there, you're going to find new struggles, but you got to just
Yes.
keep your focus on the fact that I'm going to keep digging, keep using my question tool to uncover and open up new ground,
Yeah,
and keep moving forward and look forward to the next win, the next progress that's going to come.
exactly. And I think I've quoted it before in Ryan
Holiday.
Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, where he talks about in chapter page 172, there's no number on the chapter. Sorry about that, misleading there. But he writes, just when you think you've successfully navigated one obstacle, then another emerges. But that's what keeps life interesting. And as you're starting to see, that's what creates opportunities. Life is a process of breaking through these impediments, a series of fortified lines that you must break through. And each time you'll learn something, each time you'll develop strength, wisdom, and perspective, each time a little more of the competition falls away until all that is left is you, the best version of you. And
Mm,
I think for me, that's the joy of what we do, is that I'm getting better and better at being me.
mm.
And the reason I'm getting better and better at being me is because I'm learning a lot more about helping you to be you.
Yeah.
And by us asking questions and allowing people to question us and be
Mm.
part of that process in our lives, they start to fill in the gaps that I have and make up for the knowledge that I lack and open doors for me to learn.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think we got to be aware of the fact that that's where the strategy lies. That's where the breakthrough lies. And the way
Yeah.
to get through it is with different questions.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's having that sort of sense-making partner in each other where we're able to challenge each other and we're able to challenge each other's thinking and challenge each other's questions
Yeah.
and build on each other's questions. And you have to find yourself somebody, whether it's us or somebody else that you trust, find yourself a sense-making partner to be able to push yourself in that way.
Yeah. And at the same time, get off your high horse,
Yeah.
which is what I was saying earlier, was that to get to a place of breakthrough, I had to climb down.
Mm,
And because I was the unclear.
mm,
And just with this thought in mind, getting into different questions and a different approach. I was with somebody who, in recent times, was having a really hard time with their revenue and their sales were down and so on. And we were talking about subjects that we'd spoken about a lot
the
in
cup of
recent
suffering.
months. Yeah, he's in the cup of suffering big time. And so my question was this: what assets, knowledge, or relationships are you underutilizing in your business?
Mm,
That was a question we've never asked. What assets, knowledge, or relationships are you underutilizing in your business? Make a list of all your assets. Make a list of all the knowledge that you got. Make a list of the relationships that you have,
mm,
and ask yourself: am I utilizing this aspect or this asset or this element to the fullest degree? And it's interesting because my initial response is, well, no, of course I'm utilizing everything.
yeah.
But then if you've got somebody that can just probe a little, because you're just
Mm,
looking for the next reasonable step here,
yeah.
you're not looking for an Einsteinic breakthrough. You're
Mm,
just looking for a next reasonable step, but somebody to say, okay, so let's list some assets or let's think about some relationships. Name 100 people that you know
yeah.
who know you and like you and want you to succeed.
Yeah.
Have you been to them to ask them if they've got any good questions that you could think about asking about the situation that you're in? And it's just that willingness to recognize that I'm in the cup of suffering and that actually it's
Humble yourself.
yeah, it is humbling.
Mm.
It is humbling because I think we like to be seen as people who know what you're doing,
Well,
which we
no,
do. in a way of speaking, we do.
No, I think not only that though, I think there's various things that can lead us to that point of feeling like we have to maintain a level of
Facade.
okayness. Yes, and
Yeah.
we're not allowed to be seen to not know what to do next, or
Yeah.
to feel stuck, or to feel inadequate, or any of these things. And I think to admit that and to ask others that we trust for help and for insight and for input, you do have to humble yourself. You do have to say, okay, I recognize that I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
all the answers. And I think, like you say, we're not looking for an Einstein breakthrough all the time. We're not looking to discover gravity or something like that. And that's what I was alluding to earlier when I said it was an obvious solution to the challenge we had.
Yeah.
Yes, it was 20 years worth of problem that we had a breakthrough on, but the actual thing that gave us the
Problem
unlock wasn't massive.
wasn't mega.
No.
No.
And I
It
think
was
that's what
another small step.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And just keep
Yeah,
taking those
true.
small steps. I think the other day we were chatting and you were referencing that diagram of the chap who's digging for diamonds,
Yes.
and he was with a pickaxe. You're there taking hundreds of small steps, right?
Yeah.
Your pickaxe is your question,
Yes.
and you're picking away at those little bits of dirt, and sometimes a big lump will fall out, and other times, probably most of the time, small little crumbs will come out.
Yeah.
And don't quit too soon. We come back to this again in other episodes. On that marathon, I quit too soon. I should have kept going, and I would have got the prize at the end. Had that guy
Yeah.
kept going with his pickaxe, he would have got the prize at the end. And just because your way of getting there doesn't look like how Dario does it, doesn't look like how I do it, it doesn't mean that
Doesn't
it's
make it
wrong.
wrong. No.
Exactly. And so you do you. We're telling you how we do things and the approach we take to make progress, but it doesn't mean that if you do it differently to us, that it's wrong.
Yeah, it's not prescriptive. And in fact, I'd recommend the book by Mary Lee Adams, which is profound, entitled Change Your Questions and Change Your Life.
Mm.
And this is so true, Brad. I can't agree with you more. I can't encourage people more. I can't. I don't have words. All I can say is you got to lean into it. You got to lean into the problem. You got to go and find questions. Ask people to give you questions. Ask questions. Test everything. And that's what we mean when we say test everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean put my ad on Facebook and see if it gets a result. That's one kind of test. But we're saying test every question, test every thought, test every possibility, test every opportunity. Think about everything you can think of, and when you can't think anymore, keep thinking, because that's when you're thinking real stuff.
Mm.
But you got to keep going, and if you don't get it right this time around, then you've learned nonetheless, and you're still going around the spiral. And that's what's important:
Yeah.
is the next reasonable step consistently around the spiral.
Yeah. And I would add to that, and I would say that my conclusion with this is that you have to become your own sense maker in your life and in your
Yeah,
business, because the sense maker has the power. The person who is making sense in a situation is the person that is driving that situation forward. And that is going to be a topic that we will unpack in the future. But bear that in mind. The sense maker has the power. Who or what is making sense in your business? If it's not you, you need to start asking better questions. Find yourself a thinking partner.
yeah. Again, I couldn't agree with you more. The process is identify, clarify, learn, apply. You've got to go through identify the next reasonable problem I can solve, clarify why it's a problem, learn how to solve the problem, put what I learn into practice, rest, and test.
Yeah.
If you try and go from identify down the left-hand side of that quadrant to apply directly, you're going to have a problem. It will not work. And that's where we see people coming so unstuck. It's a good rhythm to have in our hearts and our minds and in our thinking. Identify, I'm up against an obstacle. Identify, can I name the obstacle? Can I name the underlying struts and supports of this obstacle? Where can I pick the end of the string loose so I can get something to pick at and start to unravel this hairball? And keep going. Learn to keep quiet and let others talk, and then ask questions. People come to me to get advice, and then spend their time lecturing me on what they should be doing and whatever the case may be, instead of asking questions. And so we've got to learn to keep quiet and let others talk, and then ask questions. And you've got to stick with the routine, identify, clarify, learn, apply.
And just because your situation hurts doesn't mean that it's time to quit.
Yeah.
And with that, be encouraged. We'll see you next time.
And there endeth the lesson. If you found this episode helpful, why not complete the free assessment on our website at sensemaker.co.uk to uncover your Unclears.
SenseMaker, your bridge between where you're stuck and your reason for starting.